you come on set with all these technical problems that you're hoping will be solved. Then the event begins, and it's real. It's as real as it gets, which is you're watching an actor's appearance and something very intimate about someone's hair shaved off and their appearance radically altering within an hour. And, Florence walked off that chair looking different to when she sat into it. And the implications of what that meant for the story are devastating, of course. So that rippled outwards on the crew. You could feel a sort of, I don't want to say heaviness, but a kind of, they were moved by what had just occurred. It just is. There's no acting involved. It just, it sort of deepens the whole level of reality of what you're making. So there were a few of those moments in this where the kind of center of gravity somehow shifted underneath the scene.
John, thank you so much for sharing your time with us on the Movie Podcast today. How has your TIFF experience been so far?
Pretty good, I'd say. I mean, we had a wonderful screening last night. It played fantastically well in the room. So yeah, I'm very happy.
Yeah, and as you should be, because this movie is just, it truly is enchanting. It's beautiful.
We're still drying our eyes after watching it.
Okay, sorry about that.
No.
But a bit not as well, because that is what it's meant to do, but great.
Yeah, no, it truly is a beautiful film. So we're just so excited to dive into it more.
Thank you.
Today.
What was it about Nick Payne's script that you would just like, this is what I want to direct next?
Well, I can tell you the scene that I was reading when I was like, I'm in, I'm going to do, which is the birth scene. Okay. And in a way, what is in that scene captures what was very special for me, which is, the sort of absurdity of the situation for a start. And the sort of jeopardy that these two people are in, having longed for this child for so long. And Tobias, who is a complete planner with his lists and his stopwatch and everything, and fate had other ideas, and the kind of crazy, dramatic, absurd comedy of it. And then it turns into something really simple and profound at the end with the arrival of the baby. And it's something that vast numbers of people go through every day. And for so many of them, it is the most profound experience in their life. And for people who haven't had the experience, they kind of go, whatever. And the proximity of those two things felt like this was a very special film, because it was actually about something very real, which people could relate to, but was trying to express something a little bit more metaphysical about what it feels like to have a life and to try and make a relationship, and especially what happens if your time is curtailed within that.
What I think we found so fascinating too is the way you're telling this film, non-linear, the edit of it. This is a very different movie if it's told as these events are happening. And I think just the way we reflect on life, we're thinking of moments from today, yesterday, all at the same time.
Exactly.
So for you, when you're making a movie like this, are you shooting things in the order of the script, or are you shooting it as like...
I wish I had the luxury of choosing that. No. The order of the shooting is completely driven by practical factors. And there's one very obvious one, spoiler alert, the shaving of the head. So that was like a great staff that was planted in the middle of the shoot, because obviously we had to shoot a whole bunch of scenes where she would have the shaved head after that point, and there was no going back. So no, you wind up shooting on a sort of largely it's driven by sort of logistical factors. And then within that, we work very hard to try and make sure that the actors' needs and sort of emotional comfort zones are respected within that. So we tried to not make them do more than 2 time zones in a day, so they wouldn't fry their heads, and to try and cluster certain kinds of scenes together so that they would have a chance. But the truth is, they're so dexterous, these actors. Like, they could turn on a halfpenny, and they really were able to sort of hit the ground running. They never had to sort of jack themselves up for any scene. They were extraordinary.
And you see that, you see everything on screen in this movie. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it just felt very authentic. And you obviously had the opportunity to work with Andrew before on Boy A. And when did they all kind of come together into this movie? Like, when was it like, yes, this is Andrew's movie and this is going to be Florence as well?
Well, Andrew was there from very, very early on, as in, like, literally, he was the first idea I had for casting for it. And it struck me that there were aspects in Tobias which he would relish and get and be able to embody so well, and partly the sort of degree of emotionality in the character that was needed. And I knew we needed a heavyweight actor who would be able to handle that authentically and not have it be sentimental, but also the humor. And Andrew's really funny. And I don't know that he's often shown his emotional side and the humor at the same time. And I was excited for what he would do with Mr. Weetabix without it becoming too quirky, that he would also be rooted and real.
Right.
So he read it, instantly reacted. I also knew that he would play the grief of it amazingly. I mean, it's part of his own personal experience, and I felt that he would bring a degree of emotional depth that would represent that experience for people who've been through it in a way that would be very authentic. Florence, I'd never met. I had seen and really admired so many of her performances, and the degree of strength and sort of invulnerability that she was able to display in so many of those performances felt like really rich territory to me for Almut. And the question that I didn't know until we started working was like, okay, what happens when she gets vulnerable? Can she really crack in that last big moment? Boy, does she. I mean, she's extraordinary. So, but we went this, you know, the first time we checked her availability, she wasn't available because she was doing a Marvel movie. And just as we were about to move on, like literally, you know, a couple of weeks later, we said, just make one more phone call, you know, the agent said, oh my God, just this morning, that film has slid back. There was an 8-week window opened up that sat across Andrew's dates that allowed us to make the film. I mean, it was game on. So
wow.
it never happens that way. So it was sort of meant to be.
Yeah. Andrew really handles like being a tortured soul really well.
Extraordinarily well, you know. And I think that what's thrilling with Florence is, you know, her work. She's just like, she's spreading her wings creatively. She is taking off in a way that's phenomenal. And I think that this role is extraordinary for her. And I think that she's pushed through into new territory, different to things she's done before, building on things she's done. But like, it's really quite something. And when she does kind of crack and break down in the big argument scene towards the end, when you see her fears laid bare, it's devastating.
I'd love to stay on Florence for a moment here with that moment where she shaves her head in the film, and we see this in the trailer, and it's such a powerful moment in this movie because it's on her terms, right? I'm just curious for you, when you're shooting something like that, what is that feeling like on set when you're having a moment like that? And I love that Florence was saying how adamant she was on committing to that. She wanted to be authentic. If I'm playing a role like this, I need to commit to that. So I was just wondering, for you as a director, shooting a moment like that, what is that like for you?
Well, the sort of practical, logistical side of it was there was a lot of anxiety on the set. Okay, you had a very anxious cameraman. We've got a fabulous cameraman in Stuart Bentley, who I've worked with many times. And he's so conscientious that he brought in what is basically like a 3D camera rig where you've got two cameras attached together and they're both shooting the same thing. Because he said if there's anything goes wrong with one of those cameras, you know, we are, I don't want to say a bad word, we're toast, you know, which is to say that he needed it to be able to have two sets of material. He couldn't, he was in there handheld. He wanted to be shooting it intimately with them. So it was only going to be him, you know, and if he's in it, you can't have a wider shot. We couldn't, you know, put 4 cameras on it. And after about 5 minutes of shooting it, he was, I think I'm good. He knew it was good. He took one camera off and then he just trusted that the camera was working. Everything was fine. Andrew was very anxious because he had never shaved anybody's head. And he didn't want to learn how to shave anybody's head. He wanted to just do it as Tobias would do it. But again, he couldn't have a second go, okay? We were doing it for once, and that was it. And then, of course, you're watching. You know, what's interesting in your question is you come on set with all these technical problems that you're hoping will be solved. Then the event begins, and it's real. It's as real as it gets, which is you're watching an actor's appearance and something very intimate about someone's hair shaved off, and their appearance radically altering within an hour. And you know that. Florence walked off that chair looking different to when she sat into it. And the implications of what that meant for the story are devastating, of course. So that rippled outwards on the crew. You could feel a sort of, I don't want to say heaviness, but a kind of, they were moved by what had just occurred. It's one of those scenes, it's a bit like the baby in the birth scene. There are certain things, or when a dog runs into a scene. It just is. There's no acting involved. It just, it sort of deepens the whole level of reality of what you're making. So there were a few of those moments in this where the kind of center of gravity somehow shifted underneath the scene.
I'm glad that you touched upon the gas station scene at the beginning, because what I love so much about that scene is it's this mix of comedy and also something life-changing happening at the same time.
Yeah.
How do you go about kind of mixing humor with also something deeper and kind of have them intersect? How do you go about creating a scene like that?
Well, I tell you, it's the thing I always look for in anything. And I think most of the best work I've done has been able to juggle between the two of them. And for me, humor is a form of heat shield, right? It allows you to get closer to the real heart of the matter without an audience being overwhelmed by something. And I loved the gentle bumbling along of the absurd humor with the two people who were there helping the petrol station.
Their lives have changed, by the way.
Their lives are changed forever now.
Ruined their lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. What are they going to do? But the fact that and the conversation with the operator, there's so many, and Nick is such a beautiful observational writer that he would offer little details of those things, and when we were shooting the scene, and it was an extraordinary day and a half of shooting, and Florence had worked with a midwife, and we were doing very, very long takes, which basically meant she was giving birth across about a 15-minute take each time we would do it. She did it about 8 times. So the exhaustion was completely real. The sort of sheer visceral power of it was extraordinary. Because she, the breathing, the noise, the sounds, and Andrew was as freaked out and as terrified as he looked, because he was also, he was in it. It was all great, and the two other, gorgeous actors were there, equally freaked out. And I was running in and out. The midwife was going in, giving notes, giving midwife notes, and I would run in and usually give off delicate comedic notes, which is remember to play with this, play with it, because the absurdity of it is close to life. I mean, life's never one thing, is it? It's always a little bit crazy in the darkest moments, and so that's very important to me. And I think it's a sort of I feel very reassured when you have two opposite things to play with in a scene. I think you're not then limiting it, or the material never becomes thinned out to only being only sad or only comedic, or you're toggling between two things. And they cottoned on very early on that was this sort of tone of the whole film, to keep playing and bouncing between the happy and the sad. And it's also great for them. They're like trapeze artists, flying from one part to another, and the actors love to play and stretch those kind of muscles.
And it's a beautiful scene, and it's an even more beautiful film, and we're so grateful to have chatted with you today about it.
Thank you.
It's our favorite of TIFF so far. So
wow, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
Thank you.